All right, today we're going to talk about a book that really shook things up when it came out. Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. It's one of those books that's both super influential and, yeah, pretty controversial. We're going to dive right into his very first chapter, because it basically sets the stage for his entire argument. So let's get into it.
So Zinn kicks things off with this really powerful idea. He says, look, history, it's not just a collection of facts, it's a story. And almost always, it's a story told by the winners. Right away, that forces you to ask a pretty important question. Whose story are we not hearing?
For Zinn, this means that the act of writing history is never neutral. It's a choice. The facts a historian decides to emphasize, and maybe even more importantly, the ones they choose to leave out, well, that doesn't just shape how we see the past. He argues it actually shapes our sense of right and wrong in the present. And this brings us to the big example he uses to prove his point, Christopher Columbus. By taking a hard look at this traditional American hero, Zinn makes us question everything. Who do we decide is the hero of our story, and who gets pushed to the side, like a footnote?
So Zinn takes us right to that first moment of contact. But he flips the camera around. Instead of having us stand on the deck of the Santa Maria, looking out, he asks us to imagine we're standing on the shore, looking up, seeing these strange ships from the perspective of the people who are already there, the Arawak people. And he's not making this up. He pulls this right from Columbus's own logbook. He paints this incredible picture of the Arawak people coming out of their villages, swimming out to these giant ships, bringing gifts, parrots, cotton, spears. Columbus himself wrote that they willingly traded everything they owned. It was a moment of, total openness and generosity.
And then, boom, the contrast is it's brutal and it's immediate. This is Columbus's reaction, written in the very same log. He doesn't see equals. He doesn't see a culture to learn from. He sees a workforce. He sees people to be conquered.
This slide really gets to the heart of the tragedy, doesn't it? On one side, you've got this society based on sharing, a people who, as Columbus noted, didn't even know what swords were. They actually cut themselves when he showed them one. And on the other side, a mission driven by a desperate search for gold. It wasn't really a meeting of two cultures. It was a complete collision of two worlds.
So what happened next? What were the consequences of that collision? This is where Zinn zooms out from that first encounter to the horrific aftermath, and he starts to build his bigger argument by questioning our whole idea of progress, especially when the price tag is total annihilation. And Zinn does not pull any punches when it comes to the human cost. He uses the first-hand accounts of a priest, Bartolomé de las Casas, to show the horrifying toll. 3 million. Let that number sink in for a second. According to Las Casas, within just 14 years, 3 million people on that one island were dead. From war, from slavery, from being worked to death in the mines. The scale of it's just almost impossible to imagine.
Now, to be clear, this isn't some radical idea that Zinn just invented. He actually quotes Samuel Eliot Morison, a famous Harvard historian, and, get this, Columbus's most celebrated biographer. Even Morison, a guy who really admired Columbus as a sailor, used one specific word to describe what happened: genocide.
And this right here is the dangerous idea Zinn is trying to get us to see. He says that when we tell the story of Columbus as just this great adventure and we kind of gloss over the genocide part, we're actually teaching a lesson. We're teaching that sometimes atrocities are just the necessary price you have to pay for progress. And that idea, he says, is still alive and well today anytime you hear about collateral damage or necessary sacrifices for the greater good. So the story of Columbus and the Arawaks, it's way more than just a history lesson. For Zinn, it's his mission statement for the entire book. His goal is to tell the story of America not from the top down, but from the bottom up. This slide really breaks down that shift in perspective. Traditional history often talks about a single national interest, as if everyone, from the president to the person working in a factory, from a general to an enslaved person, all wants the same thing. Zinn says, no way. He says that's a myth. He sees a nation as a place of constant, fierce conflicts, and he chooses to tell the story from the perspective of those who were silenced and exploited. And this isn't just a theory, right? He actually does it, chapter after chapter. He wants us to see the Trail of Tears not through the eyes of Andrew Jackson, but through the eyes of the Cherokees. He wants us to understand the Civil War from the perspective of the Irish in New York and the Industrial Revolution from the viewpoint of the young women who are literally working themselves to death in those textile mills. So what's the big deal? Why does this all matter? Why rewrite history this way? For Zinn, this is not just some academic exercise. He sees it as a moral duty. something with really urgent, real-world consequences.
This is Zinn's final, pretty powerful warning in the chapter. He says that when we bury horrible things in the footnotes, or when we just mention them quickly and then move on to talk about other facts, we learn to accept them. He calls it a learned sense of moral proportion, and he thinks it's incredibly dangerous. It kind of numbs us. It numbs us to the injustices happening right now and quietly teaches us that, yeah, some lives are just worth sacrificing for the grand march of progress.
And so we're left with this final, haunting question that really gets to the ethical core of his entire project. By telling history from the viewpoint of the victims, he forces all of us to ask, who gets to decide who pays the price for progress? It's a question that echoes all the way from 1492 straight to our world today.